The unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it, we can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. So today I'm going to talk about pulling up the roots. During this week we've been talking about those three great issues of our time: climate change, the global pandemic, and racism. And all these issues are woven together. They're all deeply interconnected, as we are all deeply interconnected. Each one of them affects the others. The Buddha said, life is subject to suffering and unsatisfactoriness. And suffering is fundamentally caused by ignorance and selfishness. Ignorance is more than just not knowing something. There can be an aspect of willfully ignoring something, not wanting to know. We're all familiar with this. Selfish, we're even more familiar with our endless concern with ourselves, with what we want, what we don't want, our desire and our aversion. I like this, I don't like that. And selfishness is based on our ignorance of the way things really are. Our feeling of being an independent, separate self, a self that comes first. The most important thing is me. Ignorance and selfishness. And these two causes underlie all these issues we've been talking about. Human ignorance and human selfishness. We all have these qualities, all of us. They've caused our present predicament, and we can do something about them, both in ourselves and in our world. Well, let's look at each of these three issues in turn. Climate change. Well, I take this topic to include all the harm we've done to our climate, to our animals, our plants, our earth, all the beings, because they're all connected. You can't separate them out. Well, as we all know, for a long time, humans have been exploiting the earth. For thousands of years, actually. We've been farming, mining, gold and iron and copper and the like, building cities for thousands of years. And for a long time, it didn't seem to be a problem. It seemed to be sustainable. And then the last few hundred years, it's dramatically accelerated, and along with our human population, and it's catching up with us. We've been ignoring the damage we've done, the polluting of our air and our water, cutting down forests, killing and harming the animals and plants and so on. We're all well aware of this, I think. And as humans, we've been doing it on a very large corporate scale the last few hundred years, but also on smaller scales as people just try to make a living, fishing, trying to cut out a bit of the jungle so they can grow a bit of food. And it's easier to sympathize with these small-scale things than it is with the big ones, because we know people need to make a living, they want to feed their families, they've got to, live their life. It's what they've always done. It's been like us for thousands of years. And so we can sympathize with that a bit more. But still, in all of these things, there's ignorance and selfishness, because we've taken too much from our world. There's too many of us, we're taking too much, and we're wanting more and more. And the earth can no longer give us everything we want. It's no longer sustainable. And for a long time, we didn't know all the harm we were doing. We didn't want to look, we didn't want to know, an inconvenient truth indeed. And now it's right in our face. We can't look away. Here in California, it's really in our face. We've got record heat waves, we've got wildfires racing through our towns, and people's buildings, people's homes being burned, people being evacuated in thousands. And every year for the last few years it's been like this. So we're really aware of climate change. So what can we do about our climate? If ignorance and selfishness are the cause of it all, how can we do the opposite? How can we practice wisdom and unselfishness? Practice enlightened action and generosity? Or those practical terms, we can be a little more restrained in our wants, our endless craving for more stuff. We can try to fix our vacuum cleaner instead of just throwing it away and buying a new one. We don't need to have all the latest gadgets and newest stuff. In the words of a wise monk we know, I have enough already. This was his mantra. When you're thinking, maybe, that would be nice to have. Oh, I have enough already. Put it down. Very helpful. I try to remember this. Do I need this? No, actually, I have enough already. We can do our part in recycling and taking care of things. Taking care of the other beings on this earth. Taking care of the little spiders and insects that find their way into our house rather than just mindlessly killing them as we might have done in former days. We take them out, take care of them. We can't ignore the life on this planet any longer. And this is all part of our training as Buddhists. We can't just kill beings mindlessly. We can't disregard them. We have to take care with life. We find we have to do it. We can't ignore them. We can't just think of ourselves. We can no longer take refuge in our ignorance and selfishness. When we know better, we have to do better. We can't go back to the way we were. And there are all sorts of other ways we can help take care of our earth. I won't get into them all now because there's zillions of ways of helping. The pandemic. Well, in a way, it's nobody's fault. Nobody intended to start a global pandemic. But somehow ignorance got it started. We still don't really know how it began. Ignorance let it spread because people didn't know how serious it was, how contagious it was. And in many cases, people acted too late. It's understandable. But we've paid a heavy price, despite the scientists tirelessly working to find cures, to find out what starts it, what spreads it, and so forth, to keep us all informed. It still seems to be keeping ahead of us. And it's still spreading because many people don't take it very seriously, especially if you don't know anybody who's had the virus, got really sick, or died. It's kind of remote. We see these numbers of thousands of people dying or thousands of people getting sick. It's hard to bring it home to ourselves what this really means. Each of those people is loved by somebody, is their spouse or their child or their parent. All of them. There's a sadness, a tragedy there, and people bereaved. A few people may not have anyone who mourns them, but most people, there's people who love them and are really sad that they're gone. But we don't want to look. We don't really see. And we don't do what we need to do to isolate ourselves, wear masks, wash our hands and all that. People got tired of being told to stay at home. They wanted to go out and do things together, and it's very understandable, especially it's summertime. People like to be together. They want to go out and do things. And it's really nice, actually, that people want to be together, that we're social animals. But it's selfish and it's ignoring the evidence when you go out and just gather together in crowds and don't take care. So again, what can we do? Well, how can we practice wisdom and unselfishness? We can follow the guidelines, stay home, wear masks, keep our distance and all those things, wash our hands. And we can do what we can to help. Many people are doing their best to help, doctors and nurses, fruit pickers, all these people who are trying to help. And we can think of those who are most vulnerable, who can't stay home, who can't isolate themselves, who may be homeless, or they don't have clean water to wash with, or they're living in poverty. Many people don't have the buffers that we might. We're fortunate, so we can try to help where we can, and not judge those who appear to be making things worse. We don't know what it's like to live their life. To judge people does not help. It just makes things worse. Everybody has their own life to live, their own decisions to make. But we can do what we can do to try to help. Racism. Well, only recently have some of us, particularly those of us who are white, only recently have we realized how deeply racism is embedded in our country. Some of us had no idea, oblivious. And now at last it's getting our attention. We've ignored huge numbers of people and been unaware of what it's like to be them, living that life which is different because of the colour of their skin. We had no idea. Our selfishness, thinking we were the most important people and everybody else was like us, has blinded us to the huge inequalities in our country. The pandemic, of course, has brought this out, has made it more clear that there's huge areas of people who are getting sicker faster and dying more than some of us who are more protected. And this is getting our attention, and so it should. Well, actually, this is nothing really new. All over the world, people discriminate against other people because of, who have darker skin than they do, or have less wealth than they do. All over the world, there have always been the haves and the have-nots, Darker skin can mean a person's done manual labor, and they may be looked down on by people who have lighter skin because they can stay indoors. Well, it makes no sense when you think about it. We need people to pick our fruit and work outside. We need people to build houses and so forth. Where would we be without them, regardless of whether they're light, dark, or whatever? It's kind of silly. We're all descendants of Africans. I really like this. I was born in Africa, I love Africa, and I'm just really happy that we're all descendants of Africans. It turns out that all our DNA of all the people living all over the world is closer than some groups of Africans who were thousands of miles apart and had no contact with each other for thousands of years. Africa's a huge continent. But all the rest of us, people in America, Finland, Europe, Ethiopia, China, Italy, India, Australia, Kenya, Pacific Islands, all of them, all of us, are all basically the same. Very, very little difference. We've got darker or lighter skin because of where we've lived and whether we've been out in the sun a lot. Well, it seems a pretty pathetic basis for prejudice when you think about it. But there we go. This is what we have to deal with. We can't just pretend it's silly and it's not there. We have to do what we can. So what can we do? We can educate ourselves. We can look. We can try to understand what people have to endure, what they've been enduring for hundreds of years. We can try to put ourselves in their shoes and really understand, sympathize. And we can make changes. We can change our laws, we can change our attitudes, and we can work on our own minds. We can do this. So with all these three issues, they're all based on ignorance and selfishness, one way and another, and with all of them, there is something that we can do about it, which is very cheering. Or we might take social action. We might make donations to organizations. We might write books or articles or join protests. There's all kinds of things in the practical sense that people can do. And we can also do our best to learn about the issues, to learn about what it's like to be an African American person in our country, what it's like to have people, to be working in a hospital unit where people are dying of COVID, what it's like to be somebody living in Bangladesh subject to flooding. We can learn and sympathize. We can widen our view. And we can listen to what people have to say, including people whose views may be very different from our own. To listen respectfully, to hear really what they have to say, and not just wait for them to stop talking so we can promote our own view, but to really listen. We can look at different news programs from the ones we're used to see what other people have to say. We might not agree with them, but we can see that they are people just like us. They're not ravening beasts because they have a different view. They're people just like us, just have different views. And the more we can learn from each other, understand each other, although we may have our own views and keep to them, the less fear and hatred there will be regarding all of these issues, because all of them have sparked fear and hatred and blame and all that, and we don't have to do all that. Pulling up the roots, this is what we do as Buddhists. We can look at our own minds, our own reactions to things that may be going on, and we can see them for what they are, because we are all part of this. We're in no way separate from anybody else on this earth. We're all connected deeply, all of us. All these issues we've been talking about make that abundantly clear. None of us is separate from anybody else in any way at all. And we can try to step back and see with that view. The coronavirus, it spread so quickly all over the world, and it shows how much contact we have with each other. We touch each other, we breathe the air each other somebody else has breathed. We're not separate in any way at all. And there's something really beautiful about that. Although it means that thousands of people have got sick, we're not separate. We can't really isolate ourselves. The changing climate, it affects everybody, all of us. It's much harder on people who have nothing to protect them from the worst of it. People who live in conditions of drought or famine or flooding and rains or rising sea levels. Those whose livelihood is taken away because there's no fish or the rivers have been dammed. It goes on, all the ways that people have been harmed by climate change, but actually it affects all of us. Whether we're willing to look and acknowledge it or not, all of us are affected. We all take our life from this earth. We all depend on it completely. None of us can cut ourselves off from that. No matter who we are, or no matter how we may ignore this fact, we're all completely dependent on this earth, and we'd better take care of it. Because as they say, there is no planet B. Racism affects all of us. It's a terrible thing for all of us, no matter what our own race may be. Those people who are discriminated against and those who discriminate, all of us suffer. All of us are seemingly cut off from our fellow human beings. And that is a dehumanizing thing for all of us. It's a terrible thing. To live in fear of other people because we just don't know them, we think they're different from us, to see them as other, it hardens our hearts. It closes us up and it cuts us off. Just not knowing people. When we know people, we're not so afraid of them. It's not knowing. People have had no experience of another race can be frightened of them because they don't know them. But when you've met them, when you've traveled in countries full of other races, other religions, other people, you know they're just people just like us. There's no real difference. They may have different views. We're all just people trying to do the best we can, living in this world. There really is no other, as they say. We're in no way separate. As the Dalai Lama says, we're just a simple human being, one of the 7 billion human beings on this planet, whether we're pink, black, brown, white, whatever. We're all just the same, really. We can widen our view of us to include all of us, everybody. And if we can keep coming back to this basic truth, that we're really all one human family, then we can do our best to take care of this family and all of its members, to really care about people who are suffering from famine and drought in Africa, people sick and dying from the pandemic, people who are poorly treated and deprived of opportunities to grow and flourish and make the most of their lives. We can really do our best to sympathize with them. You don't have to feel guilty, but we can care about people and we can try to help. Not seeing people as other, those people over there. The closer people are to us, the more we tend to care about them as normal. And yet we can widen our view, widen our human family to include all of us. We don't have to drown in the sorrows of the world. We can also see all the good that's being done, or some of it. There's huge amounts. The conversions of hatred and prejudice, as Reverend Amanda was talking about yesterday, that happens a lot, actually. The tireless work of doctors and nurses doing their best to cope with this COVID and endangering their own lives. The work is being done to clean up our oceans, our air, our water, to reduce the pollution in our world. There are huge numbers of people working in these and a whole lot of other ways, huge numbers, and we don't see them, but we can trust that they're there and we can do our part, do the best we can to help with that. And the very best thing we can do is to do our practice. This is more important than all the rest. To do our daily meditation and keep to the precepts as best we can. It's the most important thing we can do. It's a powerful force for good. We have no idea of how much our practice benefits the world. Think of examples you've seen. Maybe an example of somebody you saw in a meeting who just sat still when everybody else is getting all divisive and heated about something. Somebody who didn't join that, just sat still. It really makes a powerful impression on us. The monk picking up the caterpillar off the sidewalk. Somebody really noticed that. It changed their whole view. Somebody who wouldn't join in a discussion of somebody else's faults. Oh, I had that happen many years ago, long before I became a Buddhist. At work, at a job, people were talking about someone's, just kind of, how people do, backbiting. And there was one person who did not join in. Not in a sort of, superior way. And I noticed, and I felt really ashamed of myself. It hurt, but I did not forget. And I've tried now in my later life to not do that if I can help it. We have no idea of how much just these simple things that we ourselves may take for granted and do, how much it might help another person. We don't do it so that we can help them. We're not trying to set an example to the world. The person doesn't pick up a caterpillar because somebody's watching. We just do it because it's good to do. And we've all had experiences like this of somebody showing us a better way. It really is powerful. So we don't know how much our training benefits the world in seen ways and unseen ways. The offering of our merit and our meditation practice, all of this, it really helps the world. This life of stillness, of compassion, caring about other beings, and especially faith in something that's greater and deeper than anything else we know, and than everything we know. Everything is embraced within it. All our pain and our suffering, our dumb mistakes, our unkindnesses, our foolishnesses, and all our joy and our kindness and our generosity and our love for each other and for all beings. All of these things are embraced within the great matter for which we train, as we call it. And it has more power than we can possibly know. Our practice is radical. It means it's about roots. Radical means roots. The roots of suffering, our ignorance and our selfishness. The Buddha said, he said lots of things about suffering, but there's one thing he said. There are 3 roots of what leads to suffering. What are the 3? Greed, aversion, and delusion are the roots of what leads to suffering. There are 3 roots of what is good, leads to the good. Non-greed, non-aversion, and non-delusion are the roots of what leads to the good. Well, note that the Buddha doesn't say we can't enjoy anything. We have to love everybody, and we have to be all-knowing and all-wise. He says we should practice non-greed, not grabbing at things, non-aversion, not nourishing hatred or ill will, non-delusion, not harboring delusive ideas. These are restraining things. They're not huge things you have to go out and do. It's hard to love some people, quite honestly. People who do a whole lot of harm. It's not easy to love them, but we can practice non-aversion. We don't have to hate them. So we find ourselves thinking crabby thoughts, we can say, I don't know what it's like to be that person. I don't know what they've been through, what kind of life they've had. If there's somebody who really we have trouble with, we can look and see, maybe there's something about this person I don't know. Maybe I can give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe I can try to see what it's like from their point of view. Again, sympathy, caring for beings. We don't have to love everybody, but we don't have to hate people. There's a simile, the Buddha. He says, he's pretty radical about roots. Just as if there were a tree smothered and surrounded by 3 parasitic vines, i.e. the 3 poisons, greed, hate and delusion. Someone would come along carrying a spade and basket. He'd cut the vines at the root, and then he'd dig around them. Then he would pull them out, even down to the rootlets, the little tiny roots. He would cut the stalks of the vines. Then he would slice them into splinters. Then he would pound them into bits. Then he would dry them in the wind and sun, and then he would burn them in a fire. And having done all of this, he would reduce them to a powdered ash, and then he would winnow them before a high wind or wash them away in the river. But okay, done with his roots, In that way, these parasitic vines would have their root destroyed, deprived of the conditions of development not destined for future arising. And this, in the same way, somebody who nourishes these 3 roots of greed, hate and delusion just creates more suffering. But somebody who doesn't do that, who cuts down his roots and digs them up and cuts them into splinters and pounds them and burns them and turns them into ash, he lives. You're not creating suffering anymore. You're doing what is good. Well, that's pretty radical. Hang on a minute, I'm looking for something. Here we are. We can do things a bit more. Brother Master used to talk about pulling up the rootlets, pulling up the roots, pulling up the weeds, even the little tiny weeds. And pulling up these weeds is, again, mostly a refraining from doing something. We can do that. I don't know about digging up the thingies and burning them and winnowing them and all that. We can, though, as we can, see what work comes up in our own mind. See what comes up for us, these little rootlets. These 3 poisons, it occurred to me that each of these 3 poisons kind of roughly corresponds to one of our 3 issues. Climate change corresponds to greed, our insatiable desire for more and more of everything, both as a species and, in big ways and in small ways, our own as individuals, the things we want. And we can say, I have enough already. Racism corresponds to hatred and anger, and it includes all forms of prejudice, whether it's about race, class, education, nationality, gender, social status, the homeless person huddled on the pavement, people in places we've never been to. Anything that makes us see us as opposed to them. It includes war, violence, oppression, judgment, and just simple unkindness or hardening of the heart against somebody, because that's them, it's other, it's not me. I don't know this person, I don't know what it's like to be them, I don't want to know. That's included in hatred and anger, actually. It's ill will, not wishing well. This pandemic, deeply related to ignorance. We didn't know how it started, we don't know how it's continuing really, we're trying to do our best, but there's a lot of ignorance about it, and there's an ignoring of it. It's not really happening, I don't want to know, it's inconvenient, I'd less like to do what I'd like. Our willingness to stop it spreading further because we don't want to look. So all of these 3 issues are kind of roughly equivalent to these 3 poisons, although of course they all partake of all of them. But I thought that was kind of interesting. Well, Non-greed, yes, I have enough already. Non-aversion. As you said, I don't have to love this person, but I don't have to hate them. Non-delusion. I can work on my judgments, my selfish views, my self-partiality. And, of course, the basic delusion is our idea of a separate, important self. This is the taproot of all our ignorance and selfishness. All comes out of this, our idea of a me, a separate, important me that's the center of everything. And if we can see how that me arises, we all have it, we need it actually in some ways, but we don't have to let it run our life. And particularly, we don't have to let it oppress other people or make us do stupid things or ignore what we need to do to help our world, help each other, help all the beings in all the many ways. And these simple things, looking at our own mind, seeing where we're clinging to something, rejecting something in big and small ways, but just doing our best to sit still in faith in that which is greater than we are, the source of all compassion and wisdom, and trust in that. Doing our daily meditation and keeping to the precepts. And these are the ways in which we change ourselves and we change the world. There's a couple of little things I'd like to read at the end of this. One of them is from the scripture on the immeasurable life of the Tathagata. Thinking of this climate change, the fires we've had, When sentient beings see at Kalpa's ending the raging fires consuming all, tranquil will this realm of mine be, ever filled with devas and humans and parks and groves, amongst towers and palaces bedecked with gems of every kind. This is not separate. This is not some world off somewhere else. This is our own world, with all the beings in it, tranquil, despite the seeming fires. My pure land will never be destroyed, though sentient beings may see it as utterly consumed by fire, letting themselves be filled with grief and horror, distress and fear. But those who, the Buddha is always here. He says, this is the whole point of this scripture. The Buddha is never gone. This immeasurable life of the Buddha. The Buddha nature is always present within us, within all beings, within all situations, all times, no matter what it looks like. Even when there's a great raging fire, my heart is calm and safe and filled with angels, as it says. And the Bendawa, which I read before actually, but I really like it, so I read it at another talk. I'm going to read little bits again. All the Buddhas, as well as all the ancestors, have kept to the Buddha Dharma as their dwelling place. One and all have not only sat upright in meditation in a samadhi of delight in the truth, but have also put the precepts into practice. And they've taken this combination as a precise and certain way to awakening to the truth. And how much strength that has. Even though merely for a moment, when someone, while sitting upright, puts the mark of the Buddha seal upon his three types of actions, namely body, speech, and mind, the whole universe and everything in it becomes and is the Buddha seal. Everything rejoices. Everything is part of it. It's not separate for a moment. Everything, all of space throughout, becomes and is enlightenment. At this very moment, the lands of the earth, with their trees and grasses, as well as the walls and fences with their tiles and stones, all the things we see, our computers, cars, buildings, everything, they're all seen to be performing the work of Buddhas. As a consequence, all who make profitable use of whatever storms and floods may arise in their training will be receiving guidance and assistance in unseen ways from the profound and inscrutable instructions of Buddhas, and will give expression to their innate understanding, which is always intimate with the truth. Everything in this world, all the walls and fences, buildings and so forth, everything expresses Buddha nature. Everything is part of it. They're all performing the work of Buddhas, nothing separate. Everything is just doing the best it can. The things we deal with, they're doing their best, doing the best they can. People doing the best they can, no matter what it looks like. Even people who are doing terrible things, deliberately doing terrible things, deliberately doing harm. Who knows what they've been through? Who knows what has happened to them in their life, what they've been raised with, what people have taught them, what they've learned, what they have, what horrible situations they've encountered, and they don't know how to do anything else. How can we judge, actually? We don't have to. Even the meditating of just one person at one time harmonizes with and is at one with all forms of being, as it tranquilly permeates all times. That's us, the meditating of us, even though we may think we're not very good at it. The meditating of us at one time harmonizes with and is at one with all forms of being, as it tranquilly permeates all times, past, present, and future. This is immensely powerful. This is a great Master Dogen. It is the same practice, in no way different for all, just as it is the same realization and personal certifying by all. All of this, all of us, are all part of the same thing. So our training has immeasurable benefit. Everyone has his own original face, our own Buddha nature, as well as their own training and practice to do, all of which are beyond the fathoming of human speculations. We don't know what it's like to be another. We don't know what their training and practice might be. But we can do our best to help. We don't have to judge. You must realize that even if all the Buddhas, who are as the immeasurable sands of the Ganges, were all together to exercise their spiritual strengths and attempt to gauge the meditation of a single person by means of their awakened Buddha wisdom, they will be unable to reach its boundaries, try as they might to fathom them. So, have faith in the power and the strength of our practice. With all the other things we can do to help our world, this is the most important thing, that we do our training, we have faith in the way, keep to the precepts, do our meditation, and trust in that, and trust in the goodness of the universe. That without fail, evil is vanquished and good prevails. No matter what it looks like, no matter how long it takes, we can hold fast to that and trust it. So thank you. That's our talk for the day.